I'm Jeremy Roberts. I'm founder brewer at 903 Brewers.
And my name's Jonathan Likarish, and I'm the head distiller and one of the founders at Iron Root Republic Distilling.
So what a lot of people don't know is the relationship that 903 Brewers and Iron Root have had way before the beginning. But Jonathan and I were actually neighbors. And I lived in a neighborhood out in Pottsboro, Texas, and it was all like people 10, 15, some of them 40 years older than me. There was nobody my age that lived there. And this was, 12, 13 years ago?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. And so, there was a U-Haul truck that was in the house across the street, and there was two young guys and an older guy. And so I walked over and I was like, who's moving in? And Jonathan was like, it's me, I'm moving in. And I was like, awesome. I saw Illinois license plates. And I was like, what brings you to Texas? And he said, we want to open a distillery. And I was like, no crap. Like, we want to open a brewery. And I think right then, that moment, it was like, almost like, it's like love, but like friendship at first, sight. From then, we just hit it on. And like, I always think back, it's almost like Step Brothers. Did we just become best friends? And that's basically what happened. From then on, there was lots of late night drinking.
The neighborhood definitely went downhill from there.
You were a big beer drinker. You love craft beer, which was awesome because that was back then, like, especially up here, nobody really drank a lot of craft beer. But like, the neat thing for me was, I drank bourbon and Coke. I didn't really understand like what good bourbon and whiskeys that were out there. And, you really kind of educated me and showed me and kind of opened my eyes and really changed my palate, as I would say. But, what made you fall in love with like whiskey and bourbon like I fell in love with craft beer?
Oh, I'd been into whiskey for a while in college. I used to drink it back. We always used to say when we had the really good stuff back in the day. And so we would drink whiskey on the weekends. Loved it at that point in time. And it wasn't until many years later when we actually discovered you could actually make your own whiskey, because I just thought whiskey, I don't know where I thought it came from. It just came from Kentucky and that was it. And so we actually found out you could actually distill it, and that was kind of sent us down a rabbit hole looking into what we wanted to make in the future. But the reality is my journey actually kind of started more on making beer, and I am not good at making beer. I found in one of my great-grandfather's old kind of diary books this beer recipe. And so we went to a little homebrew shop, and I tried to tell the guys, like, I want all these ingredients. He's like, they don't make most of that stuff anymore. And I was like, okay, I want to make beer then. So I tried making beer, tried it twice, wasn't for me. I was not a good brewer. And then we're like, maybe we're into wine. So then we tried making wine. We weren't good at that. And we're like, maybe we'll try whiskey. And so that one stuck.
And here you are.
Here I am.
So, what's funny is whenever you moved to the neighborhood, I was working out of my house and you were working out of your house. And so, I was homebrewing, 2 to 3 batches a day there in the garage. And, you'd come over and we'd brew and we'd drink and get drunk. And I think the funniest story ever was when I think it was the 3rd batch of beer that I brewed, and I'd brewed an IPA and I'd put a ton of brown sugar in it. Remember that? And we called it Sugar on Top IPA. And the next morning, I remember I called you and I was like, hey, are you alive? You're like, yeah. And I was like, hey, did I really put brown sugar in that IPA last night? And you were like, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And funny thing was, that was actually one of the first IPAs that I released when we first opened.
Yeah.
And it was a big hit. We just kind of changed it. We've talked about bringing that back. But, some of those times, like I think back about just brewing in our garage and like all the fun, crazy stuff we would do, it kind of led us both where we are today. Many late nights, us sitting at your bar, just getting hammered.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Well, that's where we came up with Milk and Honey.
That's right.
I can't remember. I know it happened. It was one of those late nights drinking, but how did that, I was trying to remember. I was telling the story the other day, and I can't remember how it came about that we came up with the Milk and Honey.
There had been another beer we had tried that had kind of some brunchy kind of flavors to them, and you and I were like, we could get on board with this. And you're like, I want to do it, but I want to call it Land of Milk and Honey. And I was like, that's a little too on the nose, but I like where you're going with it. And that was actually one of my favorite beers early on. That one was
that's the beer that built the second phase of the brewery, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't brew that beer fast enough. And that's right. I remember I was trying to tell someone the story the other day, and how it kind of came about. But I remember we were sitting there in your kitchen, but we rebrewed that beer, and it's kind of lost its course, right? And that's what happens as people's palates change, and that's what's fun about like where 903 is gone is in 2021 we brewed 152 different beers. Last year we brewed 130, and so like of just taking stuff that really no one else does or very few do, and just kind of making it happen. But I take all that, and it came back from the 12 and 13 years ago when we were either in my garage or just really at your bar. And people just don't know those stories, right? And what's really cool, because back then is we imagined being where we are today, right? And at that point, for me, it wasn't even going to happen. Like, it was a dream. Like, this is where I want to do, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And you guys have done the same thing. And to see where we're both at, and to see all the big awards that you've won and that we've won when no one else could do what we've done right here in Grayson County, especially North Texas. And so what year was it, or what award was it that really put you on the map? And what year was that?
We'd won a couple awards that were helping us out, kind of building our name in the industry, but the one that really kind of solidified everything for us was when we won Best Bourbon in the World from Whiskey Magazine's awards. So that was late 2019. So I think the awards actually came out in 2020. And so we were right as COVID was happening. That actually kind of helped float us through COVID, got our name out there. I think we were in Forbes, you were in Forbes, everybody was in Forbes that week, a couple times, I guess. I don't know. We were in it for making the best bourbon in the world, and then we were in it like 3 days later for making hand sanitizer. So it was crazy times, but that was really what kind of started our trajectory on the path we're on now.
So which bourbon was that?
That was Harbinger.
That was Harbinger.
So that's the one we're known for.
Harbinger. And then, was it last year that you won Best Corn Whiskey?
Yeah, so we've won Best Corn Whiskey 4 times now in the world. So 3 times for a bottling called Hubris, and 1 time for one called Icarus.
Icarus. So, like, to think about it, like, those are the nights, and like, I love telling this, like, the story, especially when I'm giving a tour, and we go over looking at all of your barrels that we're aging our beer at the brewery, is like telling this story of like, where we dreamed of it, and it was like in our minds, 13 years ago, to where we are today. And then especially like we have our sons are the same age, and then when we go out and we're drinking, and it's like what we're dreaming of where we're going to be in the next 10 years. And it's kind of crazy to like sit here and talk about it and think about it, but I'm really proud of what y'all have done and what y'all have accomplished, because I count a lot of our success as from your success. And especially like I love we like when you first moved in, you had all these barrel-aged beers. I think it was, which one was it from up north?
Dragon's Milk.
And
you couldn't get it in Texas at the time. I had to have it, call it imported. My mother would come down from Illinois to visit and would bring cases of Dragon's Milk for us.
And again, that was what started in, your house of, the beers that you'd brought in, especially the barrel-aged beers. And it kind of helped me understand of like, okay, this is what I want to do. And hey, if you're going to have a distillery, can I get your barrels?
That makes sense.
And so, the marriage, as we would say, just kind of came about. And, so like when people come in, especially for Barrel Age Fest, right? So we're releasing on Saturday, February 4th, 6 different barrel-aged beers, all aged in iron root your barrels.
That's right.
And it's neat because like we get the barrels right after you dump them. We've in the past, this was before you started releasing barrels, we'd gotten a bunch of Macallan Scotch barrels. And when we got them in, like the rings were falling off, they were dried out, and it was 20 barrels, or Scotch barrels, that we had to dump them all because it got infected. One tasted like sour apples, the other one tasted like nail polish. So what people don't understand is like when we put beer in barrels, we count those as a complete loss. So if it turns out great, it's just icing on the cake for us. And so, we're pretty picky about, what beers what barrels get pulled for Barrel Age Fest. And then we're picky about what adjuncts. And so, like right here in front of me, this is one of the 6 that we're releasing. And so this one actually, people were like, what beer you released for Barrel Age Fest? This is Barrel Age Fest. That's the name of it, right?
Again.
Yeah. We sometimes we get a writer's block on names, and it kind of happened on this one. But this one's going to be distributed out to about 20 different markets, so that people could really see what have done with our barrels, especially going into our 10th year. Actually, this is our 7th year to release barrel aged beer. But this one that we have in front of us has got caramel, chocolate, marshmallow, and coconut.
This one's decadent.
Yes.
Yes, it's delicious.
This was 13 months in your barrels, and it's 13%. It's like 13's our magic number, right? And what's dangerous, and you can talk about it, but like it does not taste 13%.
No, it's got the mouthfeel of something that's up there, but there's no heat from the whiskey. There's no burn of any type. So I mean, it's just thick goodness.
So one of the things that we've done is we've tried to make our stouts thicker, right? But not too thick because you're full, but not too thin where it's like just have a thin mouthfeel. So for me, I'm gonna tell what I taste, and then you can kind of talk about what you taste. But like right there out of the gate, I get like the barrel characteristics. So it's like super dry at first. I get chocolate, I get caramel, and then marshmallow. You get like that mouthfeel. You know what I'm talking about? And then coconut, because we do so many coconut beers, but coconut is very faint on the back end, which is what we like because we love coconut, but a lot of our customers don't, and which I don't understand, right? But that's what I get this, but I love the mouthfeel on this one. I mean, you kind of taste the same things I do?
Absolutely. I think for me, it's kind of, I picture when I start tasting this, it's got kind of that cherry cordial thing. So I think the cherries might be coming from the whiskey, but it's got the cherry and it's kind of got almost like a coconut cream around that and then a hard chocolate shell on the outside. But the texture on it's velvety. It's perfect. It's great.
What's funny is you say cherry. I didn't even think about that at first. Now that I taste it, right? But, the other day, it was I think it was the Harbinger. It was the 117. I'd gotten it from Specs, and I poured it, and I was like, I taste cherry. And then the next day, I tasted no cherry. And I texted Jonathan. I was like, hey, man, I must have been drunk. I'm sorry I didn't taste cherry at all. But it's weird what your palate does, right, and what it tastes. Mm-hmm. But
this one's a cherry bomb. So
let's try that one. So tell us about it.
Well, so we have our Harbinger series. So the one we're known for is the 115. That's the one that won the big award. We have one called Harbinger XC that's down at 90. This is actually a special edition. So this is last year's summer Harbinger. And I actually picked this one specifically to pair with some of this because it has kind of those big similar notes to that. So
what's funny, I'm gonna kind of talk about what Jonathan's done for me. So, I get a lot of friends that are over, and Jonathan, like, as y'all know, like the beers that we brew are really big, high ABV beers, right? I love a big beer. So for me, if it's 90 proof, I don't even want it. So when people come into my house and drink some Iron Roots, whiskey, I'm like, you got to understand, this isn't the Jack Daniels you have in your pantry. Like this is some big boy stuff. Like I've got 2 bottles of your hazmat, which is what, 143?
So just for those out there who don't know, in the whiskey world, there are things called hazmat bottlings. And so technically if something's above 70% alcohol or 140 proof, you're not supposed to take it on a plane because it's considered a hazardous material. So it's nicknamed a hazmat bottling. So we've put out to date 3 different hazmat bottlings. 2 of them were corn whiskey hubrises. And then the last one was the tri-barrel that followed this one, which was a hazmat bourbon, which is extremely rare. So 140 proof is, I think the hazmat, the latest one was 141.5 maybe, somewhere like that. But it's up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll get you right? It's like
it don't take much.
It didn't take much. So we joked about back and forth during COVID is that the reason why we weren't getting COVID is because we were drinking hazmat. It was killing everything out because like you and I are both the same. We didn't have the choice of staying home. We had to be in the public eye. People were coming into the brewery to buy beer. People coming to the distillery to buy, whiskey. And so, I think that's what helped me get through it was the high proof whiskey that's where I fell in love with it. So where I'm going with it is I remember when I first started hanging out with you, Jonathan makes the best cocktails. And so I was so lucky to live in the same neighborhood as Jonathan because he would just make us drinks all night. But, I would never drink bourbon neat. And so, with no ice in it, right? So, or water it down a little bit. And so I loved old fashions, and you make the best one. And so I remember coming here, and we were tasting it out of the barrel, and I was just like, it just made this face of like, what did I just taste? And then you'd water it down. But now, like, I still love old fashions, but this is pretty much the way that I drink my whiskey now.
It's way easier. Right?
Way easier, and
can't screw it up.
Can't screw it up. But at the end of the day, like you taste, with what you wanted it to taste like. So talk a little bit about this one. What flavors you taste on it?
Oh, like I was saying earlier, this one does have a big cherry note in the middle of it. It's got a lot of older woods to it. So a lot of those things you kind of associate with something that's been kind of a well-aged bourbon out of Kentucky. This guy, I think he was right at 5-year mark on what he was doing. So in Texas, this is actually a fairly old bottling. Things tend to age a little bit quicker here from an extraction standpoint, and so he's got a lot of kind of those older wood notes to him. He does have a little bit of the chocolate notes that we were talking about in your beer, and so this is actually kind of a nice pairing. So this is...
It is a nice pairing, but like you gave me a bottle of this, and I think it was gone over the weekend, which happens a lot in my house, right? But
it's a fun weekend.
Yeah. Back to another thing that I learned from you guys is like, especially I have the privilege of coming over here and seeing how you guys, and we're in Iron Roots Barrel Room, and how they age their bourbon and whiskey. And so, whenever we first started doing our barrel age, we aged it in a climate controlled room. So it was 70 degrees year round, right? So in the summer we had the air conditioner on. In the winter we had the heater on. So it stayed at that ideal temperature. Well, coming here, today it's going to be 50 degrees outside, and it's probably, what would you say it is in here?
Probably 55. 56, yeah.
And then in the summer, what does it temperature get in here?
The hottest I've ever seen it in here is 98.
98.
Yeah.
So what you taught me was, don't worry about climate controlling your beer in the barrel, because the beer is already done fermenting, so it's finished. Because in our mind is we want to keep it at what the temperature was when the beer was in the fermentation tank, right? But so for us, we ferment our stouts at 70 degrees. And then we cold crash it, which means we drop it down to 31. It's not freezing, and all that sediment drops to the bottom. And that's what we package it at. So then we take it before we can or keg anything, and then we fill up your barrels, right? So it's already cold, so it's going to warm up. So what we learned from you was whatever temperature it is in our production facility, that's where we're going to let the beers age. And so sometimes, especially in the heat of the summer, and with us brewing, it'll get, over 100 degrees especially high up. And so what we've learned is, we'll talk about the liquid, like bourbon and whiskey in a barrel, what it does in the heat and the cold. And then so that way I can explain what our beer does too.
Perfect. Yeah, so when we put it into the barrel, what we're going to do is we want to extract out of the wood. We want some oxidation to happen in terms of whiskey. That sometimes it's okay for beer, sometimes okay for wine. We really need it for whiskey. You don't want it to not oxidize in there. And so all these barrels are actually oxygen permeable. So we've got a lot of chemical reactions happening that are oxygen dependent. So air's going in. We've got it pulling flavors out of the wood. So we put it into the barrel. There's some sort of pressure change that happens back here in this room. So it could get hot, it could be barometric pressure changes. If I open up the doors back here, we've got a bunch of big garage doors, and air flows over the top of it, there's convective flow. What ends up happening is we have a pressure differential between what's outside the barrel and what's inside the barrel, and that's gonna cause stuff to either flow into the wood or out of the wood. And when it flows into the wood, that's when it starts dissolving all these flavors. Now, all of our barrels, all the ones for bourbon are charred on the inside. That acts like a big filter for the whiskey, which is a good thing because that pulls out stuff we don't necessarily want. It goes through all these other layers that have these caramelized wood sugar layers. It picks up vanillin, which is a fancy word for vanilla flavors. It picks up tannins, which give the whiskey a lot of structure. And then the pressure changes. It comes back into the liquid. and it seasons the rest of that barrel. And the faster that's happening, the more it's what we call extracting the barrel. It's pulling all those flavors out. Now, in Texas, that happens really fast. We have, I mean, it's nothing for us to, what was it, not like 70 degrees like 2 days ago, something like that. And that was right before the snowstorm. And so, but with all those pressure differentials, the temperature differentials, we're in and out of the wood a lot faster than most whiskey producing regions. And what that's doing for us is aging up the whiskey from an extraction standpoint very fast. You can take advantage of that in the brew house from doing the exact same thing as far as you can get in and out of the wood. So when we fresh dump these barrels and send them off to 903, what ends up happening is there's still a little bit of whiskey in that wood. You hear about things called the devil's cut, things like that. So yeah, I can't get it all out of the wood without a whole lot of effort. And it's not worth it from a financial standpoint for us to get it out. So it's better for us to give it to you and let you find those flavors in the wood with your beer. And so you put the beer in there and you can go through the same processes.
And that's what we've learned, right? So we've, because we were real scared about letting our beer be hot in our production facility. Especially like there's big breweries in Colorado we go and visit and they have a room the size of this room that's climate controlled. But, the thing is like we've learned to take advantage of the Texas heat and especially our brew days. And so, it pulls from it, and then when it's cold, it goes in, right? And so, for us, what we do is like if it's in the summer and it's time because we're going to release some barrel-aged beers this summer, we'll put them in our cold room, which is under 40 degrees, and then let it kind of cool down and then get ready for us to package it. But once we started doing that, we've noticed like and I'm not just saying this as a sales pitch for you to want to buy our barrel-aged beers, and Jonathan's very honest, but like over the years, especially 7 years, you probably have seen a big difference in how our barrel-aged beers have turned out. And
I can tell that this one in particular was not pulled when it was really hot.
Yeah.
So when things are hot out in the barrel room for the whiskey or for the beer, if it's pulling a lot of fresh tannin into the whiskey at that point in time, it's extracting a lot. Tannin is when it's pulling in there, it's kind of a drying sensation, but it actually feels like hot cinnamon on your tongue.
Yeah.
This is so velvety soft. You can tell that you guys took a little bit of extra care to it to make sure that you got a good pull out of the barrel, so it wasn't extra spicy from the whiskey that was in there beforehand.
It's kind of almost like, I was listening to you say that, I was like, it's almost like flying a plane, right? So you want to come slowly, come down for landing versus just that crash, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're, I think that's why the winter is so, well, obviously, we drink big stouts year round. So, everybody's like, it's stout season. I'm like, it's always stout season 903. But the thing about it is it starts to cool down. Like you're right, that beer is starting to come out of that barrel and it's like ready to be released. Or we've already been putting, we started in September, putting in beer in your barrels for next year for Barrel Age Fest, right? So get it ready for it. But this one here is one that I'm excited about. I think the star of the show, we haven't bottled it yet, is going to be it's the maple vanilla. I keep wanting to say hazelnut. It's not hazelnut. It'll come back to me in a second. But it's going to be the one that I think people are going to like the most. We've got the cookie dough stout. Of course, we've got the birthday Sasquatch this year, which was the funfetti, which was cake and buttercream, which is phenomenal.
The peanut butter cup.
The peanut butter cup. Yeah. And so peanut butter has always been, I think, the most excited about barrel-aged beer that we release.
I love peanut butter.
Everybody does. So we just didn't want to do peanut butter this year. So we did like the peanut butter cup. And then we've got one with chocolate and ancho chilies and coffee and vanilla. So we're actually pulling that one out of the barrel today and getting ready to package it the first of next week. And it's the last one that we've got to get ready for the festival. But so for the festival on Saturday, February 4th, we've got a bundle, which is really cool. You get all 6 different barrel-aged beers that we're releasing. You get a tasting card, and then you guarantees you to get our Barrel-Aged Fest glass, which is really cool. Barrel-Aged Fest 2023, Iron Root Republic, and then 903 on it. And it's $100. If you were to buy those at the tap room the day of the event, it's $150. So we've got a limited amount that we're going to release. So you can go to shop903.com right there. Now, we never pre-sell tickets for events. So if you just want to show up and you don't want to partake in Barrel Age Fest, We're going to be open from 11 to 9. The party kicks off at 11. Vance, who is our maintenance guy, he's actually in a bluegrass band, and they've played a couple times. I love bluegrass music.
Oh, yeah.
It's drinking music, right? That and polka music is, you're ready. You hear that playing, you're
That's
like,
more of this kind of music
yeah,
right here. Yeah.
you're ready to start drinking. The restaurant's going to be open all day long, serving amazing food. So, Jonathan, I just, I know we talk about how our friendship, how much it means to it, but I want to, let you know that like these, we turned 10 this year, and it's been, an honor to be able to, work with you so much and dream about so much and about our ideals and our vision. I'm excited to, to see where we're at. It's fun to talk about it because you're like, damn, we really came a long ways, right? But I'm really excited to see what Iron Root's got in store, for this year and then many years to come. So cheers. Appreciate you. Thank you for everything that you do for us.
Thank you.
And the barrels. And we'll see you on Saturday, February 4th for Barrel Age Fest.